7 of the fantasy football season. Here's running backs, starter sits at every matchup this week. The first matchup, the New Orleans Saints at the Arizona Cardinals on Thursday Night Football. So right here, Alvin Kamara obviously going to start in this ball game. Kamara, the last 2 games, he's really just starting getting things going here for this New Orleans team of fantasy owners who obviously had him drafted in the first or second round. So right now, Kamara's getting going. I know it looks like Jameis Winston might not start this ball game again, and then Michael Thomas is probably out again, but Kamara, he can catch passes out of the backfield. They're utilizing him better, I believe, this season than last season, and especially with bye weeks really kicking in now. He's a start this week. Now to the Cardinals side of things, Benjamin, if he plays, I know he didn't have the greatest of games, but the big workload was there. So if James Conner's out in this ball game, you fire up Eno as a low-end number 2 flex option this week. He had 20 touches about in that ball game. I know he only scored 9.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues, but this Saint defense ain't great versus running backs. We've seen it the last couple weeks. Dalvin Cook have a good ball game in week 5. In week 6, Joe Mixon, a solid game. Now James Conner, he didn't practice on Monday here for this Arizona Cardinal team, so I don't know if he's going to make it in time with the rib issue to Thursday's night game. But if Conner does play, I'm going to start him in this one. So then on to the next game, New York Giants at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So SAQUON Barkley, there's nothing to say. He's a top 3 running back each and every week, it seems like, in fantasy points. He's trying to get that big contract, and he's on his way to it with the season he's having. So obviously you start him no matter what. Now Jacksonville, James Robinson, I know it's been a struggle for him over the last 2-3 weeks of the season here, barely getting 5-6 fantasy points per game. But I think in this matchup versus the Giants, this is going to be a grinded out type of ball game for the most part here, with I think the Giants winning, obviously. But James Robinson, they got to get back to running in between the tackles more. We saw a hasty break, a 61-yard touchdown, even though that was a fluky type of thing. But Robinson, I'm going to give him one more chance this week here and start him as a low-end 2 running back. Now to Travis Etienne. He had one big run that was over 50 yards in that week 6 ball game, and if he didn't get that, he pretty much didn't do anything as Etienne. But he's starting to get more of a workload for this Jacksonville team, but I don't think he's a guy I really could count on this week here, so I got him as a borderline option. Obviously, with all the bye weeks and injuries at running back, you're probably going to start him, but I'm not expecting another big game. If you don't have a big breakout run, is Etienne here. His fantasy value is diminished. Next matchup, Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. So Jonathan Taylor, if he comes back off the ankle sprain in this one, obviously he's a running back you're going to fire up as your number 1 guy. Obviously first pick in most fantasy drafts this season. And Deion Jackson, he looked great in that ball game with 28 fantasy points in PPR leagues, but he left with a quadricep injury late in the 4th quarter for the Indianapolis Colts. But if Taylor's out, I'm throwing Jackson right back out there in the starting lineup. If he plays, obviously, with Taylor out and Nyheim Hines after coming off a bad concussion, I don't know if he's going to play in this ball game. But even if he does play, how could you have him get touches over a guy like a Deion Jackson who, if Taylor don't play, or even a Phillip Lindsay? So right here, if Hines plays in this game and Taylor's not back and Jackson's not back, he's still a borderline option in my opinion, Nyheim Hines. He's not really an in-between the tackles runner. I know he's a good PPR threat, is Hines here, but I just like the way Jackson played in that ball game, and he had 10 catches as well and physical running at the goal line. So right now, Nyheim Hines a borderline start this week, and now Phillip Lindsay is possible. He could be the number 1 running back if all 3 of these guys are out once again here in week 7. So a lot of moving parts over there in Indianapolis. So right now, if Lindsay's the man, he's a borderline option as well, because I don't know if he's got much left in the tank here for this Indianapolis Colts team, and he's still trying to pick up the playbook as well for Lindsay, only getting signed a couple weeks ago off the practice squad. And that side of things, we know Derrick Henry's been one of the best running backs in fantasy football over the last 3-4 seasons, and he got off to a slow start the first 2 weeks of the season. But weeks 4 and 5, he got back into the zone here as Derrick Henry. And this week here versus Indianapolis, I think he has another good ball game. And we just saw the Indianapolis give up a lot of big plays in the running game in week 6 versus Jacksonville. So Henry, once again, he's going to be a top 10 running back, even less this week. So he's a start. And the next ball game, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers. Fournette, the last couple weeks here, he's really starting to get it going in the receiving game here. He had an 11-yard catch for a touchdown in week 6 here with Leonard Fournette. So Fournette, he's another guy, you pretty much got to throw him out there no matter what, and it's an amazing matchup at the Carolina Panthers. The Bucs here, they're not happy. They're very shocked probably that the Pittsburgh Steelers upset them, and they're going to come out in this game fired up and ready to go. So I think Fournette has a big one in this one. 20 to 30 fantasy point range is definitely possible. Now Rachaad White is back up. He's just not getting enough work for me to have confidence in playing him, even as a borderline option. I know a lot of buys. I know injuries and stuff this week here. But Rachaad White, he's only getting one series to himself and some third down work. So right now I know this ball game could be a blowout, but you never know with the way Tampa's been playing, and it's a division matchup. So right here, Rachaad White, I'm going to have as a sit because I just can't count on him doing much with 5 to 8 touches in a ball game. Now, Christian McCaffrey, just like Barkley, you start him every week. This guy, he's putting up numbers. The only thing with him is obviously injury concerns for Christian McCaffrey, but so far so good through the first 6 weeks of the season here. I know there's trade rumors, but I don't know if they're going to trade him. We saw them trade Robbie Anderson to the Cardinals, but they've won a haul, I'm sure, for Christian McCaffrey. Now to the Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys. So right here, if DeAndre Swift does come back in this ball game, I'm going to have him as a start, but we still haven't heard news on Swift if he is or not, because Swift, he was a first, second rounder in most fantasy drafts, and he got off to a great start before he went down with his injury. So right here, if Swift's back, you start him. I know this Dallas D-line is pretty solid, but Miles Sanders, he just came off a pretty good game versus Dallas with 14 fantasy points in Week 6. And now Jamaal Williams, if Swift is back, he's a borderline option for me. Is Jamaal Williams. Even if Swift isn't back, it's a tougher matchup, and he's not that dynamic as a running back as a DeAndre Swift, because this Dallas team, they got embarrassed for the most part in Week 6 versus the Eagles. Even though they made a little bit of a comeback, I think this team's defense is going to come out, and they're going to attack the run and have Jared Goff try to beat him, even though Jared Goff's having a pretty solid season. Even though on the road this year, it's been a struggle for him. So right here, Swift, if he plays, he's a start. And Williams, no matter what, is a borderline number 2 running back this week. Now to the Cowboys side of things, it looks like Dak Prescott is ready to go. And that just opens things up for the run, because obviously Cooper Rush, I thought, played well at quarterback for this Cowboy team. But a lot of teams were loading the box and making Rush try to beat him, which we saw the Eagles do, especially after they got off to the good start and they stopped. They won that ball game and had 3 turnovers. But anyway, Ezekiel Elliott, he looked pretty solid in that Week 6 ball game. It looks like he's getting his spring back a little bit, as Elliott, and he's getting to that second level, which over the last few seasons, it looked like he lost juice and the speed was gone. But Elliott, the last couple weeks here, he's running hard, getting to that second level a little bit, and even found the end zone versus Philly. But now with Dak back in the lineup, most likely, it opens everything else for everyone else. And Tony Pollard, I even have confidence in him this week. We know he's got breakaway speed. We know he's a dynamic weapon. And now with Dak back in the offense, I think Pollard we're going to see on the field more. We're going to see some 2 running back sets as well, because the offense, they dumbed it down when Cooper Rush was in there. Just conservative a little bit, short, easy plays. And now they're going to try to hit big plays, even though I don't always agree with it with Dak Prescott at quarterback. They try to do too much with him, but Tony Pollard's going to have more of a role now with this Cowboy team. I think we're going to get more touches and more receptions as well out of them. So I got both running backs in Dallas as starts this week. Now to the Packers at the Commanders. So right now we know Carson Wentz is out, and honestly, this could possibly be a better thing for this Commander offense in terms of not turning the football over and Heineke being a little more versatile, getting away from the rush than a Carson Wentz. But anyway, Aaron Jones I got as a start. I know the last 2 weeks, poor ball games, and he's a buy low candidate, because Aaron Jones, we know he's a running back that's capable of putting up running back 1 numbers. So right here this week in a good matchup at the Commanders, I think Aaron Jones, he gets off the schneid here after coming off 10 and 7.5 fantasy days here, and has a good one. And this Packer team, they just can't throw the football a lot. A lot of young receivers, they don't know the whole playbook, I'm guessing here. And that's why they lost 2 bad ball games to the Giants and Jets. I know those teams are playing well, but the Packers still should have beat those teams, in my opinion. Now, A.J. Dillon, it's been a struggle for him since Week 1 here. Last week was one of his better games at 9.40 fantasy points, but he's still a running back. I'm not 100% into this week as a guy to go out there and start. So right now, if you don't have better options and you want to roll the dice with Dillon, I got him as a borderline option, but his ceiling, in my opinion, is 15 points at most, which would be solid, but he's failed to even come close to that since Week 1. Now to Washington side of things, Brian Robinson Jr., it's surprising he came back this quick from a shot wound in his foot. So right here, he came back in 5 weeks as Robinson. He's a big physical back. And this Washington team obviously likes him. He had 17 carries. He had the goal line work in that ball game in Week 6 versus the Chicago Bears in Chicago. And I got Robinson as a start. He's a good number 2 running back this week, I believe. I know this Packer defense is pretty decent, but we've seen SAQUON, BARKLEY, and Breece all the last 2 weeks have big ball games. I'm not saying, obviously, this guy is them, but this defense is vulnerable to giving up rushing yards and touchdowns. Now, Antonio Gibson and McKissick, I just can't see these guys doing much in this game, especially with now Taylor Heinicke in there, quarterback. You don't know what you're going to get from Heinicke, even though he played well a few seasons ago, is Heinicke. But Gibson, he wasn't doing much, even when Wentz in there getting pretty much a full workload. And now with Robinson Jr. as the guy over there, he's a sit this week. And McKissick, I know he's a third down back, but his games are few and far between of putting up fantasy numbers. So this week here, I got him as a sit as well. Now to the Falcons at the Bengals. So borderline options, Tyler Algier and Caleb Huntley. But I like the way Huntley's run. He's a physical running back, short yardage guy as well, where it's possible he could get a goal line stamper in this ball game. But these guys, I know they're getting 12, 15 carries a game, but they just haven't done much with them, in my opinion. So this week here, I know the bye weeks, I know some injuries at running back, but I've got them both as borderline options. You're hoping one of these guys breaks out on your bench, and then you could start them for the next few weeks until Cordell Patterson hopefully comes back. Now to the Bengals side of things, Joe Mixon, it's been an up and down type of season here for him. But in a plus matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons here, he's a start. And it was good to see last week Mixon catch a slant route for a touchdown. So Joe Mixon, he's a guy, no matter what, you fire him up every week is a low-end number 2 running back. And this week here versus the Falcons, I think could be one of his better games of the season. Now to the Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. So right here, Nick Chubb, I don't care the matchup. I don't care who his quarterback is or who he's versing. I know it was a down week last week for him versus the New England Patriots. It was just game script. But you start this guy each and every week, so he's a definite start. Now Kareem Hunt, struggling season here for him. Last season, I believe he had more work than he did this year. Nick Chubb, they're giving the reins more, and rightfully so. Nick Chubb's a more talented running back than Kareem Hunt. The only thing Hunt's probably better at than Chubb is catching the football out of the backfield. But right here, I got him as a borderline option. A lot of people down on Hunt. And last week, he only had 2 or 3 fantasy points, I believe, versus the New England Patriots. So this Raven defense against the run is a little similar Patriots in a way. So Hunt here with the buys and stuff, at best, he's a borderline option for me. Now to the Raven side of things, it's just been a carousel of running backs the last couple seasons with injuries, with this, with that. But anyway, last week we saw Kenyon Drake come in for Dobbins, who left the game with a minor injury. We'll see if he even plays in this ball game here in Week 7. But anyway, Kenyon Drake had some pop in that game. 10 carries, 119 yards, and a touchdown. So a lot of people ran out to the wire and got Kenyon Drake. But I had Drake earlier in the season where he got the carries and got the work before Dobbins came back, and he didn't do much. And in this ball game versus Cleveland, I can't count on Drake as a number 2 running back. Maybe in deeper leagues as a flex option or something, but as a number 2 running back and a guy to have high hopes for, that definitely should start. I'm not going to have Kenyon Drake as that. And even Dobbins, if he's back and he's healthy in this ball game, he's a guy I don't want to deal with because he's just been inconsistent. He's had the one good game a few weeks ago, believe it or not, versus the Buffalo Bills, but that was touchdown dependent. So right here, I don't want to deal with anyone in this Raven backfield. And even Gus Edwards possibly could come back this week. And Justice Hill now to the New York Jets at the Denver Broncos. Breece Hall, in my opinion, he's a top 10, top 15 running back rest of the way. This guy's explosive. To be honest, I wasn't big on him coming into the season, but he's definitely proven me wrong, is Breece Hall, and he's taken the league by storm at the running back position. He's the next big running back, no doubt about it, and even with a mediocre offensive line, he's finding holes, and he's making playmaker plays here, is Breece Hall. Now to Michael Carter. I know he's a good running back last season for fantasy football, but this year here, Breece Hall came in and totally took over here from Michael Carter. So Carter this week, how could you really have confidence as him as a start? I know a couple weeks ago he had 2 touchdowns, but this Bronco defense, we know they're tough. We know they could stop the run pretty well here. And this week I got Carter as a sit. Now to the Bronco side of things, a messy situation over there in the backfield where it's pretty much a 3-headed thing, even though in Week 6 Mike Boone, he was out of the game plan. He was barely on the field, so it's going to be Murray, and Melvin Gordon. But even Melvin Gordon, second half of that ball game, he was just on the sideline the whole time with his helmet off, and we saw shots of him shaking his head. So right now, Latavius Murray had a solid workload with 15 touches in that ball game versus the Chargers. And this is a tough matchup. Believe it or not, this New York Jet defense has been solid over the last 3 weeks of the season here. Russell Wilson, he looks done to me, even though he came out in that first half of the ball game and looked good. But right here, at best, Murray's a borderline number 2 running back flex option. And after what I saw in Week 6, Melvin Gordon, they phased him out in that ball game. And Mike Boone barely saw touches. So right here, Gordon and Boone sits. And Murray, if you need a running back desperately, he's a borderline option this week. Now to the next game, Houston Texans at the Las Vegas Raiders. Not much to say in this one. Dameon Pierce, solid number 2 running back each and every week. Pretty much no matter the matchup, unless you have great options, but you probably don't, especially with the bye week. So Pierce, good start this week. And now to the Raiders side of things, over the last 3 weeks here, Josh Jacobs has been a top 3 running back. And with a plus matchup here versus the Houston Texans coming to Vegas and coming off the bye week, he should be fresher. He should be ready to go. And this guy Jacobs, he's been running with a chip on his shoulder after the Raiders pretty much didn't want to play him coming into the season. So he's a definite start and probably a top 10 running back this week. Now Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Chargers. Kenneth Walker, he's a guy that reminds me of Le'Veon Bell a little bit. The way he's patient in the hole, the way he does that starter step, and the physicality as well. So Kenneth Walker, every week, he's a number 2 running back and minimal for your fantasy team, especially obviously with Penny out for the season. So he's a definite start. And Austin Eckler, the last 3 weeks of the season here, he's been probably the best running back in terms of fantasy points for fantasy football. So Eckler, he's an automatic start. Joshua Kelly, we saw him get a good workload in Week 5, but Week 6, not much from him. So he's a guy you're not really going to count on or think about. So I got him as a sit this week. I know Sony Michel got work as well, but he's a guy I'm not worrying about as well. Now Kansas City Chiefs at the San Francisco 49ers. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I've been saying it for weeks here. He's been a touchdown-dependent running back, and if he don't find the end zone, he's not putting up fantasy points. The last 2 weeks here for Helaire, he's failed to reach 6 fantasy points in both ball games. So right here in a tough matchup at San Francisco, I don't trust him. He's a borderline option for me at best here. And it wouldn't be surprising in the next couple weeks here that Isaiah Pacheco starts to get more work for this Kansas City Chiefs team. Jared McKinnon, another guy, I really can't trust him as well. The workload in this backfield is just weird. And this is a pass-first team, obviously, built around Mahomes and Travis Kelce. So right here, in a tough matchup, I don't like McKinnon, I don't like Pacheco. And if you're desperate and you got Edwards-Helaire, he's a borderline play at best. Now to the 49ers side of things, Jeff Wilson Jr., he's been a solid running back, except last week versus Atlanta in a plus matchup where I had him as a top 15 running back. He just didn't show up, and he finished the day with 0.5 fantasy points after fumbling the football. So I think Jeff Wilson, they're going to get back to it in this one. And, they're going to want to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field here as the 49ers. So right now, Jeff Wilson, I think this week here, is a guy that could bounce back candidate, and I got him as a start as a number 2 running back. Now, Sunday Night Football, Pittsburgh Steelers at the Miami Dolphins. Najee Harris, I know he scored a touchdown, but after that touchdown, he didn't do anything pretty much here. So Najee Harris at best is a borderline running back. If he don't get a touchdown like Edwards-Helaire, he's pretty much only putting up 5 or 6 fantasy points a week. So what a bust he's been. It's not totally his fault. The offensive line hasn't been good. They're changing quarterbacks left and right. Pickett's in concussion protocol. So I'm guessing we're going to go see Trubisky again in this one. And whatever quarterback it is, it just don't matter. Both these guys haven't done anything to help Najee Harris. And this week, he's borderline at best. But if I'm a fantasy owner and I got better options, he's a sit. Now, Jaylen Warren, they said he was going to get more work. We saw him in there for more snaps in Week 6 versus Tampa, but he only had 2 touches in the ball game. So right now, you can't trust him. He's an easy sit. Now to Miami side of things, Raheem Mostert, I like the way he's been running. The only thing with Mostert, obviously, throughout his career is staying healthy because he's been made of glass in his San Francisco 49er days. But Tua's coming back, sharpen the offense up a little bit more in this Miami Dolphin offense. And Raheem Mostert, I think they're going to lean on him more in this ball game here. So I like him as a number 2 running back this week for your fantasy team. And I got him as a start. And Chase Edmonds, I mentioned him in my videos. In my drop videos, he is a running back to drop. No matter what, he's not getting the workload. Even if Mostert went down, I think Myles Gaskin would be the bell cow over there in Miami. So Chase Edmonds, he's a running back over the last few weeks. He's failed to even reach double digits in 2 games combined in touches. So right now it's been Raheem Mostert over there. And Edmonds, they signed him as a good acquisition in the offseason. But once again here, he's lost in the shuffle over there in Miami. And now on to Monday Night Football. Chicago Bears at the New England Patriots. So right here, David Montgomery is a low-end 2 running back this week here. I like him. He's getting the workload. Khalil Herbert, we didn't see much from him, even though he did break a 60-plus yard run in that game. But he didn't do much when it was all said and done in Week 6 versus the Commanders. So Montgomery is a guy that hopefully could get 8 to 12 fantasy points as a number 2 running back this week here. You start him because the options aren't great. He's getting a good workload, like I said. And this ball game could be a grinded out type of game between both teams. So right here, Herbert not getting the workload. He's a sit. And now to the Patriots side of things. Harris, surprisingly, he almost suited up in that ball game in Week 6 versus the Browns, where a lot of people thought he would be out multiple weeks, but he came down to the wire before he was declared inactive. But anyway, Ramondre Stevenson, another big game, back-to-back games. And this guy here, he could be a big-time running back for fantasy owners as Stevenson. So once again, he's a start. Even if Harris comes back, I don't know how this team can revert, giving Harris more carries and especially the goal line work. Stevenson, a better receiver out of the backfield than Harris. And I got Stevenson as starting. If Harris is back, he's a touchdown-dependent running back as well from what he's done this season. So right now, if he don't score that touchdown, he's another player. 7 and 8 points at most you're going to get from him. But Harris, I think they're now playing the hamstring injury over there in New England. And this week here, I don't know if he'll play. Even if he does, I got him as a borderline option this week. So that's the Week 7 running back. Start to sit every matchup of the fantasy football season.